Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's review we're going to be taking a look at the Transformers Earthrise Galactic Odyssey Collection Dominus Criminal Pursuit 2-pack, Earthrise Barricade and Punch Counter Punch. Now this set here was one of my second favourites to be announced for the Galactic Odyssey Collection. Of course the Earthrise Ratchet and Lifeline pack has got to be the standout out of these sets so far. However, I'm pretty sure that this set is going to perhaps appear rather lackluster to those collectors who already have the Punch Counter Punch figure, and for those of you who are not all that fussed about Earthrise Barricade, as these two figures here are basically just direct repaints of already pre-existing molds. Unfortunately with this set we do not get any brand new tooling, which in my opinion I find a big negative, especially where Barricade is concerned. However, of course we will discuss that later on in the review. Personally for me, I'm actually quite happy to have both of these figures in the collection, especially as I missed out on the original Punch Counter Punch figure, and I've always been a massive fan of Barricade ever since the live action Michael Bay movies. So without further ado, let's kick things off by taking a look at Punch Counter Punch, and then of course we'll take a look at Earthrise Barricade. Starting off here firstly by taking a look at Punch Counter Punch. Here we have him in his Decepticon persona, that being Counter Punch, as of course for those of you who are unaware, Punch is essentially an Autobot spy which can go incognito in order to spy upon the Decepticons. An amazing concept, and a concept of which I think Hasbro and Takara Tomy really did replicate rather nicely with this particular figure. Now I do believe that this was released on the back end of the Power of the Primes toy line, very close to when the War for Cybertron trilogy did kickstart, and unfortunately as mentioned earlier on in the review I did actually miss out on this. So when I learned that Hasbro would be repacking this figure, I just knew that I had to pick this setup, and I've got to say that this figure here, for someone who has never handled the mold, does not disappoint whatsoever. Now something which is worth noting is that this figure does indeed lack paint applications. It is nowhere near as well painted in my opinion from what I can see from some of the promo images of the original release. However, in terms of the mold, he is pretty much identical. So taking a look here at his Decepticon face, you can see there that we've got some really awesome paint applications going on with the blue faceplate, silver mouthplate, and then the red visor, and you can also see that we've got a very menacing crest which has got some nice paint applications. I do like how you can hinge these sections around here for the shoulders in order to create for a slightly more intimidating look, and as we take a look here at the torso you can see a Decepticon insignia there, as well as some really nice looking sculpt work. This here is indeed a faux chest piece and does not become the front windscreen of the vehicle mode. However, I've always mentioned in my reviews that if the faux pieces help in order to maximize robot mode and they don't hinder vehicle mode, then I'm all for it. As we take a look here at the shoulders, you can see some nice sculpt work for the forearms as well as here for the hands. From what I can tell, these have indeed been painted in a very dark looking blue with the alternate hands painted in a red, and as we take a look here to the lower section, you can see some nice sculpt work going on there, as well as some real nice sculpt work for the actual thigh sections. And as we take a look here at the shins, in my opinion his Decepticon persona certainly does have a little bit more variety in terms of paint applications than as opposed to his Autobot form. However, we'll take a look at that later on in the review. You can see that we've got some nice metallic highlights there for the shins, as well as some black sections here which I believe are supposed to replicate the toes. In terms of articulation, the head is on a ball joint, so this can look left to right as well as up and down. You do have to hold the head in a certain way, otherwise the visor will flip down in order to reveal his Autobot face, so I recommend just applying some pressure at the back and you shouldn't really have any issues with that. We do get ball joints here at the arms which can rotate the full 360. Due to the nature of the transformation, this section here can also hinge up and down, full 360 rotation here at the bicep, as well as a 90-degree rotation here at the elbow, full 360 rotation at the waist. The legs can kick forwards that far, back that far, of course can do the split. As we take a look here at the thigh rotation, very similarly to his original release, these are pretty much impossible to rotate without popping the ball joint off. This one here barely moves, and then if I just try to move this one, it will completely take the leg clean off. And I've actually noticed that the joints here have been reinforced with pins, which I have never noticed on a deluxe class figure before, but it is great that we do have that extra sense of security when handling this figure. Due to this character having two personas, the knees can kick forwards that far as well as back to that far, and of course we don't get any form of foot rotation. In terms of accessories, we do only get one small yellow blaster with this, and once again I do believe this to be a direct carryover from the previously released version of this character. Of course we don't get any of the prime armor for this figure, however the ports on the chest are still here, turning him here into his Autobot persona, that being Punch. You simply just want to hinge the Decepticon insignia down like so. We can then take the hands here and I basically just swivel them around and then close this cavity, of course, remove the blaster in order to allow for some clearance, flip that section around and then hinge the elbow accordingly. We can then turn our attention here to the front, and of course you're just going to want to take the visor, lift this up in order to reveal his Autobot face. And something which is actually quite finicky to do is you're going to want to hinge these sections here upwards on this hinge joint. Rotate the shoulder around and you will notice that we do have a slot that will peg into this tab. I recommend hinging the arm up like this just so that we have something to actually apply pressure on, as believe me, it does take quite a considerable amount of force, especially the first time round, to get this tab into this slot. So I recommend just bringing this over and snapping that in there nice and securely. Of course, come here to this side and repeat the exact same process. So hinge this section here around, extend it on the hinge joint, bring the shoulder section up, and then of course just snap that in there also, and then just flip the Autobot insignia up, and here we have Punch in his robot mode. And once again, it is exactly the same figure as we got previously, however this time minus some of the additional paint apps. The most noticeable missing paint apps that I have noticed are to do here with the thighs. I do believe that on the original version we did get some nice details here, and the actual rims here have gone unpainted. But taking a look here at the Autobot head sculpt, you can see that we've got a silver mouth plate there looking very reminiscent to Optimus Prime. We've also got an entirely new sculpt here for this crest section, and the eyes have been picked out in a really nice blue. I love the contrasting colours as well. We've got a very predominant yellow torso, whereas here for the counter punch we have an entirely blue torso. We've got red hands here, and of course the Autobot insignia, which is indeed a printed on detail and not a sticker. And of course the articulation here for punch counter punch is exactly the same as what we got in the counter punch mode. In terms of transformation, this is actually quite fun to go back and forth from, in my opinion. So to begin with, you're going to just want to detach these sections here on either side, bring the shoulders in, and these are basically just going to snap over the top like so. Of course, come here to this side and just fold all of that in accordingly. What I then recommend doing is turning your attention here to this back section, folding this section here out, and then flipping all of this out. We can then bring this over the top. I recommend hinging these sections here up just to allow for some clearance for this faux windscreen to actually snap nice and securely into place. We can then fold the Decepticon insignia down. The Decepticon insignia is going to want to be folded down, and the Autobot insignia is going to want to be folded up. If you have this here folded up, it doesn't really allow enough clearance for you to actually fold some of the other components over. Just take these sections and snap these here into place on both sides. Come here to this side, of course, repeat the exact same process. I have found this here to be rather finicky. And then here for the forearms, you can see that we do have some tabs that will peg into some slots on the side of the torso, and of course repeat that here on the opposite side. Turning your attention here to the lower section, we're going to want to flip around, hinge this section out, fold this out, and then fold the front windscreen out. Of course, repeat the same process here for the opposite side. We can then bring both of these sections here together, and basically this entire section is going to flip up and around and will rest along there. And then of course we're just going to bring the two halves together, ensure that everything is aligned up appropriately. You can see that this tab will peg into this slot here, so bring this entire section over, ensure that everything does tab in nice and securely. Of course, repeat the same process here for the opposite side, so just snap that in there, and then take the windscreen, collapse that down, tab the two halves together. This section will overlap on these two tabs, and then just bring the front wheels down, and there we have Punch Counter Punch fully transformed up into his rather awesome looking sports car vehicle mode. Now, something which I have noticed with this figure is if you don't have this section here folded in the correct orientation, even by the slightest, he will be unable to roll along the ground. There is literally barely a millimeter of clearance, so that certainly does make transforming him a little bit more finicky. However, of course, with practice, I'm sure you'll pretty much nail it. As we take a look here at the windscreen, you can see here how it does fold over the pre-existing faux windscreen. I like the details here on the front section of the bonnet, and we've also got some nice transparent plastic here along the sides. Of course, it would have been nice if this could have been a more smokier color of plastic just to hide this underlayer, but you can see here we've got some silver paint apps, some rear tail lights, as well as some yellow paint here on the sides. No red rims as stated earlier on in the review. And as we take a look here at the front, this is where I am unable for the life of me to actually get this section to sit flushly. I've really tried to apply as much pressure as I possibly can, and I just cannot get this aligned appropriately. But you can see that once again we've got some nice transparent plastic, some nice darker highlights here, as well as the yellow paint applications. As far as his blaster is concerned, you can peg this here on the top via the 5mm port, or there is actually a specifically designed tab here which you can take this slot and actually peg it into. However, I must state that when you do peg this in, as mentioned earlier on in the review, due to the minimal clearance, it is more than likely going to actually rub along the ground, and you can see here that unfortunately the figure does not roll nowhere near as smoothly as he did did without it tabbed under there. Of course, I imagine if you played around with it a little bit more and compressed all of this in, you could probably maybe get it to pass. However, this is certainly an area of which I wish was slightly refined, and I wish that these sections here could actually clip into place so that you didn't have to worry about the orientation. But that just about wraps up my coverage here for Punch Counter Punch. Let's take a look at Earthrise Barricade. Taking a look here at Earthrise Barricade, unfortunately, out of the two characters that come packaged in this set, I've got to say that despite some of my early presumptions in me believing that this would be the highlight of the set, it is certainly not, and he is probably one of the weaker Galactic Odyssey figures that we have indeed got, and that's just because, in my opinion, he's such a lazy repaint on Hasbro's part, and this is one of the rare instances where I actually do prefer his Siege counterpart over his Earthrise counterpart, and I've always been a huge advocate for the Earthrise smokescreen mold. However, here for Barricade, I just think that this figure is so lazy. Not only is the colour palette incredibly dull and boring, but they haven't even gone to the extent in changing the head sculpt, which is one of my major issues with the figure. Taking a look here at said head sculpt, you can see that it is merely just the exact same as what we got with Smokescreen, so we unfortunately don't even get a carryover of that amazing Siege Barricade head sculpt. As this figure is packaged in a very similar box to the Generation Selects, you are unfortunately able to see what actually awaits you inside, so you can see that I do have some QC issues here on the top, which is really unfortunate. However, you can see the Decepticon insignia, the weapons are the exact same as what we got with Smokescreen, however this time of course have been cast in a much lighter shade of purple. That's probably one of my major critiques with this figure, is the colour of purple used is so pale in comparison to what we got with the very vibrant, almost electric purple that the Siege version had. You can see that in terms of the blaster, it has just been completely painted in a metallic gold, which I've got to say does look quite nice. As we take a look here to the lower section, you can see very bland in terms of its design. No transparent purple plastic here for the shins, which once again I think is a major missed opportunity. And as we take a look here down to the lower sections of the toes, these have just been cast in an entirely black plastic. In terms of articulation, of course, we get the ball joint here at the head, hinge joints here at the arms which can hinge back and forth as well as outwards, full 360 rotation here at the bicep, as well as a 90-degree bend here at the elbow, full 360 rotation at the waist. The legs can kick forwards that far, back that far, hinge out to the sides, rotation here at the thigh, as well as a well past 90-degree hinge joint here at the knee. And due to the nature of the transformation, the foot here can pivot forwards and backwards, as well as of course rock side to side. In terms of a comparison, here we have Earthrise Smokescreen. So as you can see, they are essentially the exact same figures, just this time done in a different colour scheme. And here bringing in the Siege Barricade, once again I'm very surprised to say that I do actually prefer his original Siege counterpart over the Earthrise version, which honestly I would not have expected to say whatsoever. You can see that just comparing the head sculpts there, in my opinion the Siege version looks so awesome, very menacing, and even if they'd just carried this head sculpt over and put it on this version, I probably wouldn't have had that much of an issue with this figure. You can see that in terms of the colour of purple plastic, they are more or less exactly the same. However, where I really have an issue with this figure is in regards to this amazing transparent purple plastic that we got on the Siege version, which really brought this character to life for me. You can see that that is now completely gone here for the Earthrise version, which has left a rather bland looking figure. So overall, despite him not being a terrible figure, and whilst it is nice to have an Earth mode version of Barricade, I just think that the potential here has certainly been lost, and this could have been one of the best uses of the Smokescreen mold to date, but it is probably one of the worst. In terms of transformation, of course, as this is the same as Smokescreen, it is rather simplistic to do, so you of course just want to remove the blaster and the shoulder cannons here on the top. We can then just hinge these sections here out to the sides, take the head sculpt, of course rotate that there to the back. We can then detach this section here, bring this up and over and snap that nice and securely into place, bring the arms around and tab those in, and then of course bring this section here down, repeat the same process here on the opposite side like so. We can then rotate the waist around, fold out these sections here to the tops, and then just bring these sections in and snap them nice and securely into place. And then of course just take this section here and hinge this up and over, which will then allow you to just bring the arms down to fill out this section, collapse this back piece in, fold in the heel spurs. You can see tabs here that will peg into the slots on the doors, so just snap them nice and securely into place. And here we have Barricade Incognito in his Earthrise alt mode. And as far as a police car goes, I think that this here looks rather nice. Unfortunately, we don't get any of the movieverse details, such as the Punish and Enslave here on the back. Once again, I think that subtle details like this really could have just made this mold slightly different, and it maybe would have made me like this mold slightly more. But you can see that we do have the police here on the sides, as well as Troop D. As we take a look here at the front, once again, very elegant in terms of its design. We of course do get the light bar here at the top. So of course, course, if you have Smokescreen, you'll know exactly what to expect as far as molds go. For a comparison, of course, we'll bring out Punch Counterpunch. You can see that as this figure was released as part of the Power of the Primes line, he is a little bit larger as far as the Lux class goes, but in terms of length, you can see that they are pretty much the exact same, with Punch Counterpunch being slightly taller. So overall, in terms of Barricade, as mentioned in robot mode, whilst it's not a terrible figure, he's just certainly not one of my favourites out of this wave. And so some final thoughts here for the Galactic Odyssey Barricade and Punch Counterpunch set. Overall, I think that it's a pretty decent set. Of course, by far not one of the best from the Transformers Earthrise line, and for those of you who already own Punch Counterpunch and are perhaps not all that fussed about Earthrise Barricade, then I think that this set here can be an easy miss. The reason that I picked this set up was because I missed out on the original Punch Counterpunch, so really wanted to get one of those figures into my collection, and whilst I'm not a massive fan of the overall colour scheme, I do like the overall look of Earthrise Barricade, and I was a huge fan of the Deluxe Class Earthrise Smokescreen mold, so whilst it's not a terrible figure, I just think that its potential has certainly not been reached, even if they just put some transparent purple plastic on the shins, just to give a little bit of variety and a little bit of oomph to the overall colour scheme. I think that that maybe would have made me like the set a little bit more. The head sculpt is certainly a deal breaker for me. I have no idea as to why they couldn't give him a brand new head sculpt. We've seen them add retooled parts in the Galactic Odyssey collection, most noticeably with the Earthrise Ratchet, so I have no idea as to why this set here didn't receive the same treatment. So overall, if you missed out on Punch Counterpunch and you really like Barricade, then I think that this set here will of course be a pickup for you. And of course, if you are picking up the entire Galactic Odyssey collection, then you are not going to want to miss this set out. It is one of the more interesting sets. As mentioned previously, the Paradron Medics and the Criminal Pursuit sets, in my opinion, are the best to come out of this Galactic Odyssey collection, despite some of the discrepancies that I may have with these figures. But overall, it has turned out to be a rather nice set. I really hope that you enjoyed this review. If you did, please do let me know down in the comment section below, and also be sure to let me know down in the comments on whether or not you agree with my thoughts, and if you will be picking this set up or giving it a miss. I thank you all for watching, and until my next review, I'll see you then.